2019. Did that get flipped on now? It is. Okay. Well, Kit and I attended a interesting event last month on the 23rd featuring this guy, FFRF, that's a Freedom from Religion Foundation. And I definitely recommend that organization. It's activists, they bring lawsuits against school districts that are trying to indoctrinate kids, things like that. I'm a life member myself. Anyway, this guy's their attorney, one of their attorneys, Andrew Seidel, who's in town to promote this book that he's written, Founding Myth, Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. Mr. Seidel gave a very interesting talk outlining the drive of these Christians to plaster public institutions with ideology and slogans on their claim that, and we've all heard this, that the U.S. is a Christian nation. Am I standing in your way?
You're great. You're good.
Very good. I don't want to stand in your way either. So he gave many examples of this, and if you've seen police cars festooned with "In God We Trust," or you get your property tax bill and it says "In God We Trust" on the thing, then you know what I'm talking about. Religious freedom laws allowing Christians to practice invidious discrimination against non-Christians on the grounds of religious freedom for them. They hate gays and anyone else they disapprove of. That's another item on their agenda. They claim that leaving their deity out of things and not acknowledging Christian theological doctrines is the same as the government promoting atheism, which obviously is just ridiculous. Not saying anything. I mean, if they're going to promote atheists, they would say, don't trust in God, there is no God on the dollar bills, instead of just leaving it blank. So their goal is to Christianize the nation so as to relegate non-Christians, and especially atheists, to the status of second or third-class citizens, or even de facto non-citizens. And this will also involve reversing Roe v. Wade, banning abortion, and many forms of contraception. Christian nationalists consider the Handmaid's Tale not as a cautionary tale, but as a guidebook for the kind of world they want to have. Mr. Seidel pointed out that the Supreme Court has more and more been failing to prevent this dismantling of Jefferson's wall of separation. He cited the imposture relied on even by the Supreme Court that theistic and Christian slogans, quote, this is from a Supreme Court decision, have lost through rote repetition any significant religious content. Now think about that, That's why believers pray and chant the same words endlessly, right? So they will be drained of their religious significance, right? What hypocrisy. Seidel also pointed out, as was pointed out in February 2017, NTCUF bulletin all those years ago, that the zealots of Christian nationalism are the most committed and reliable of President Trump's supporters, and he in turn caters to them, even though he never had before given any indication of sharing their ideology.
Can you read?
Can you
Yeah, I was going to say, can you read
the
cartoon to us?
On the left, the one person is saying, under God, the pledge is a government violation of state-church separation. He says, don't worry, it's a meaningless bit of ceremonial deism. The other person says, oh, so you wouldn't mind if we take it out? No, it's an important statement of our faith. And then the lower bars is showing what Seidel talked about, where the strong Christian nationalists versus not Christian nationalists. Now keep in mind, this is statistical information. How did they tell whether someone was a Christian nationalist? There are people, somebody asked me, is it a Christian nation? Well, I mean, it is in the fact that that's a majority religion. So we'll talk a little bit, in just a little bit, our subject today about statistical information. Hopefully after today's service, you will be very aware of all the information you come across. 9 out of 10 people this, and 6 out of 30 people that, all the statistical information that we're always being presented with. Anyways, when the Q&A session started after Mr. Seidel's remarks, it was striking that the first thing that came up were issues relating to what religion is and what it is not, and to what degree not being religious means being secular. We're not ourselves very clear on all those terms. And I know we've all heard this, not religious but spiritual. We've all heard that, right? But the meaning of that is muddy, right? Because spiritual can mean a bunch of different things. It can mean believing in the supernatural and even an afterlife, reincarnation, psychic powers, the New Age people, but not necessarily any doctrines related to such beliefs. Or you could have noetic or oceanic feelings, like, I just close my eyes and I just feel like one with all of humanity. But that doesn't mean you're interpreting it in a supernatural sense. It could mean having a sense of awe or wonder. Richard Dawkins has said that, that he gets high just thinking about the wondrous nature of nature and so forth. And just deep emotions of any kind. When you love someone, that's just, the kind of feeling that you have is, it's not the same as some equation that you learn in science class. Did I leave anything out? What else could spiritual mean? I think those are the broad categories. Clearly, belief in the supernatural is contrary to facts and reason, the touchstones of free thinkers. But those last three are just common elements of human experience, at least for many people. Weird experiences and weird feelings are not uncommon. How many people have had weird stuff happen to them? Just, oh my gosh, waking dreams and things like that. Feeling at one with the universe or connected with people or places distant in time and space. Feelings like deja vu. How about jamais vu? Deja vu is something that is familiar that feels unfamiliar. Jamais vu is something that's unfamiliar that feels familiar. And then there's also presque view, which is the feeling that you're on the verge of making an important discovery. You're just on the verge, just momentarily you're going to have this epiphany or understand the meaning of the universe. That's what presque view. I don't speak French very well. Who speaks French here pretty well? Anybody? Okay. Well, presque view, P-R-E-S-Q-U-E, view, are real. These things are real in the sense that you really can have such feelings. To the extent that they may be enjoyable, of course, fine, but they're not evidence of, much less prove the existence of the supernatural. You can either view them as just normal brain function, or maybe there's glitches in the brain. I don't know how you want to classify that, but if you welcome those experiences, savor them, and kind of think about them, then maybe you're spiritual. At any rate, Mr. Seidel noted that the American Humanist Association, that's their symbol up on the left. I looked for a white one and couldn't find it. That'll have to do. But Seidel expressed skepticism about the idea of religion and atheism being compatible. And then someone pointed out that the event itself was being held at a Unitarian church, which of course welcoming to atheists. And as we know, the Buddhists are, that's their Dharma wheel down at the bottom there. Unitarians have that flaming chalice. And in fact, Mr. Seidel was holding forth in this space, in this church, that would usually be occupied by the minister during services, and then just steps away from it where there was this little doohickey, the chalice that they put a light in or light a candle. There's banners on the wall saying different UUism type of slogans like "Our doctrine is love," quote unquote. So it's kind of funny that he's making that comment in that context. And that wasn't the only paradox. Towards the end of the event, it was asked whether there was any chance of the U.S. motto of "In God We Trust" going back to what it was, "E pluribus unum." Although my favorite would be Ben Franklin's "Mind Your Business." Wouldn't that be a cool American motto? After all, we had a president say the business of America is business, so mind your business. Also, stop being judgmental to others and so on. And lots of cool meaning in that one. Mr. Seidel surprisingly said that such a change away from the "In God We Trust" is, quote, inevitable because of the demographics, unquote. And of course what he meant was that the growing proportion of Americans who say that they're not religious would eventually want that kind of change. But this seems a bit, to me, a little bit overconfident. People who have no religion are not the same as people who think about and understand why supernaturalism is wrong, much less that God is offensive and an absurdity. Not being religious is not the same as being able to appreciate the appeal of the supernatural and understand a non-supernatural, spiritual sense of life and the human condition. Supernatural religions have held sway for so long that it's difficult to grasp that if science is not enough, which was our topic last month, that's no evidence for or reason to embrace the woo-woo. So it seems doubtful that people whose atheism is a mile wide and an inch deep can be counted on to support state-church separation, much less appreciate what religion really should be. And of course, that's what the Christian nationalists are counting on, the toleration of other people who are not, who are far more tolerant than they are. not without their ever having resources to check out. They need these kinds of things. People need to read Dawkins, Dennett, Hitchens. These and many others all do an excellent job of showing the intellectual bankruptcy and the foolishness of Godism, but they don't do much in the way of indicating what the alternatives may be in the struggle to make sense of our lives. And that's, of course, this is what I was just talking about. This is where the church Freethought comes in. The idea behind our church is based on thinking, not believing. We're changing the paradigm. That's our main message. Religion is not and ought not to be about supernaturalism. Legitimate religion is not and ought not to be about doctrines and dogmas that deny scientific fact and hold that science and many of its most promising technologies are somehow immoral or corrupting. And also authentic morality. We've all heard this, how can you be an atheist and be moral? Authentic morality is not just a means to an end of saving your own skin by pleasing an invisible tyrant. How can being good in order to get into heaven and avoid hell, how can that be moral? It's just a means to an end to this saving your skin. Most of all, religion is and ought not to be about buying happiness and peace of mind through faith, which is to say at the price of denying and destroying one's own power of thought concerning the things that matter the most, as Christopher Hitchens used to say, at the price of your own mind. That is a truly profane and sacrilegious act if ever there was one. But our message is not primarily negative, it's positive. Others will continue to try to force us into a category of the other, the atheist. It even sounds kind of offensive, atheist. But the truth is, the good news is that real religion is just about making sense of our inner world of experience, what goes on supernatural inside your head. And that inner world of experience, all of it, that is beyond the enterprise of science. They can describe it, they can write down what people say about it, but they can never actually measure or make a machine to do it. Not like we can send space probes out to Pluto, which we did recently. It was really cool to see the pictures of Pluto. It's got mountains and stuff on it. But they can't ever put a probe into your mind and know what you're thinking. Maybe they'll never be able to do that.
Yeah.
We'll see. On the other hand, if you could read somebody else's mind, you're still reading their mind with your own perspective, not theirs. So it seems like there's a little bit of an impossibility there, almost a violation of the terms. So religion is really about investigating, honestly considering and grappling with and seeking some understanding of what it is like to be the people that we find ourselves to be. It is about accepting the challenges of life as we actually and subjectively experience them, engaging in a quest for personal growth, enlightenment, and peace of mind, and striving to better ourselves by becoming maybe just a bit more like the people that we would really like to be. Something we're aiming at. And the deepest secret of all of that is that there's no one program or procedure to follow. It's not being Scientologists. You follow their thing to get clear and so forth. There are no rosaries and e-meters, no feats of meditation or asceticism or self-flagellation. I mean, not that that's bad if you want to beat yourself up. Go ahead. But we say that every part of our inner sense of self and the journey through life that we take is something to learn from. And although none of us can know what it is like to be someone else, we and others benefit from sharing as best we can, talking about what we find, what we learn, and how we try to make sense of our individual voyages of self-discovery. That's what we are, and that's what we do and what we try to promote. There is no future without a past, because what it is to be cannot be imagined except as a form of repetition. We talked about this, I put this up in a previous service. We don't know exactly where we are or where we're going, but hopefully we do learn from the past. And oh, there goes another moment that's just now in the past. And so in that spirit, as we have a few times, September 1st, that was the day in 1914 that the very last known passenger pigeon, they named her Martha, died at the Cincinnati Zoo. That marked the extinction of the species. How many have heard of the passenger pigeon? My kids had not. Have you? People born after, the dodo is the example species of one driven to extinction. But the passenger pigeon was once the most abundant bird in North America and possibly the world. Estimates are as many as 3 to 5 billion individuals at their peak. Flocks of them were said to have blackened the sky, as you see in that lower left picture. It was a migratory bird from which it got its name, breeding around the Great Lakes and eastward, but ranging into the Great Plains in Texas and the West. And they were around here. Native Americans hunted them, but when the Europeans came, they were hunted much more extensively all through the 19th century. Meanwhile, their habitat was gradually deforested because they tend to eat acorns and stuff in the woods. They must have seemed, these birds must have seemed just inexhaustible, kind of like the buffalo. But their numbers slowly dwindled and then declined sharply from 1870 to 1890. It was believed that the last wild bird was shot in 1901. The extinction of this species, populations of white-footed mice, which also feed on the acorns, grew. And this is the species of rodent that harbors the microorganism that causes Lyme disease that we hear so much about. So the extinction of the passenger pigeon may have contributed to that present problem that we have. There are still, believe it or not, ongoing genetic studies using material from museum specimens of this bird. September 1st, 1939, that was the beginning of World War II. It was on that date that Hitler invaded Poland. And the previous day, there had actually been some false flag operations the Nazis staged to make it look like Polish people were attacking them, and so that was their excuse. Of course, all the major powers were soon involved in the conflict, along with most nations of the world. The Japanese had already been fighting the Chinese in Asia since 1937. World War II was the deadliest war in history, with 70 to 85 million casualties, including, of course, the genocide and the Holocaust, and 200,000 killed in the first and so far only wartime use of nuclear weapons by the U.S. against Japan, which finally brought hostilities to an end. In fact, I might be here today because of that, because my dad was scheduled to be part of the invasionary force. But, you know, when the whole world, when the whole war came to a standstill. Global maps were redrawn, including the partition of Germany and Korea, and within another decade, Vietnam. With regard to the atom bombing of Japan, when I visited Japan, I was told by one of the tour guides in Hiroshima that it was the opinion of many of their experts that had we not put an end to the war, and that way when we did, that Japan might have wound up being a divided country as well, because it would have prolonged things. The Soviets would have, as it was, the Soviets grabbed some of Japan's northern islands, and they might have grabbed even more of that country. So, good and bad to everything, as we say. The conflict, World War II, that's had such profound effects on all nations of the world that scholars are still studying such questions and are likely to continue doing so for many years. Speculation about how history might have unfolded and any number of things that happened differently is a favorite subject of fictional alternative histories, including how many have seen this Amazon TV series, Man in the High Castle. Anybody? Kit and I have watched it. You need to watch it. The really funny thing, this is the idea is that the Nazis and Japanese won World War II, that the Germans developed the atom bomb before we did and took out Washington, D.C. To me, one of the most fascinating parts is that they have a Nazi character like Obergruppe Führer Smith, and I don't think I'm spoiling it because it's not the whole story, but this is a guy that gets up in the morning, puts on his Nazi regalia, goes to work, and then they show him coming home and he's walking up to the house with a white picket fence, wearing all his Nazi stuff. I don't think that's just the most normal thing in the world, which of course it was, based on this 1962 Philip K. Dick novel of the same name. So this is our creed, or what we aspire to. I never get anybody saying, well, we should change it a little bit, agree or disagree. I'm always wanting to hear, we don't have a statement of faith or anything. What we do require, what every single person ought to require of themselves, is just enough sanity to realize that beliefs, which is only where thinking leaves off, that they need to be grounded in facts and reason. And of course, that's part of the topic what we'll talk about today. Things with statistics, what we do with that. Most effort goes into our monthly service. Each one of them is different. We've had many very good ones, one of which we hope today is one. We once wondered whether we'd run out of things to talk about, and we never have. Please let us know how we're doing and how we might do it better. Even better, help us do it better. Don Krause had a great idea earlier in the year for a service on Ayn Rand, and he gave most of it. It was very interesting, and of course she was an atheist, and maybe you wouldn't believe or agree with her ideas, but it would be good just if everybody was an atheist, at least you'd have that common ground. Not that we need to convert everybody, but let us know how you can would like to help. John Gauthier also had some amazing moments of science. Had one last month on the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And it started, it was not last month, month before, I guess it was. So we started out on somebody trying to figure out how to make light bulbs more efficient and ended with an account of why atoms have the structure they do. Just a fascinating talk. But brief, there's still a moment of science. Anything you come across that you think may appeal to your fellow freethinkers, maybe you read a poem or paragraph of some book that's related to our doubt. I would say our faith, but we don't have faith, we have doubt. So we have other things going on every month as well. We have game night every Friday at the IHOP at I-35 and Northwest Highway. You can show up there and see if you can beat Don or Kit or Mark. Mark. Oh, Mark, he's hard to beat. Yeah. He's a ruthless player. Shows no mercy. Yeah, cutthroat. So see if you can beat up on him. We also meet on non-first Sundays of the month at the Embassy Suites on Bass Pro Drive, just a little ways northwest of here. This is all in your bulletin. They have food there that goes away at 10:30, including made-to-order omelets. It's a little bit pricey, but you need to get there by 10-ish, since it goes away at 10:30. The bulletin is also available online. The one we have today will go up hopefully pretty soon, but the past bulletins all have this information as too. The point is we can always do more, but it takes people to come up with ideas, and more important, to put those ideas into action. So give it some thought. It could be just a one-time event of some kind, movie night or whatever. Put your free thinking into action and enjoy the rewards of helping in some way to push the world in a better direction. And we don't have any kids here today, but we're always ready for kids. Kid has some games and cool stuff back in the car. If one showed up right now, we could close the back thing there and show them how to have a good time too. We always also want volunteers for that. John Hendricks, of course, and Edwin schlepped the equipment in here every month. John Gauthier, our videographer, as I said also. And Eric Kelton, who's not here, we didn't see him at the event either. He said he would be there, and we didn't see him. But he helps us to maintain our social media presence. So there's always lots to do. The point is, you are this church, and I encourage you to think of how you can make use of it to do good things. It's almost like a little, speech makers. What's the group? Toastmasters. Friendly audience if you want to give a brief address. If you think, like most of us, that there's something seriously wrong with the traditional religions, then help us do it right. Help us do religion right. And with that, we'll have a moment of science. How many have heard about this report recently? Huge report. It's generally accepted by reasonable people and denied by the unreasonable, chiefly superstitious zealots, that sexual preference is not something that people choose to have. You don't get up in the morning or at any other time, I think I'll be heterosexual today, or I'm going to be homosexual. This has motivated a search for genetic causes of sexual preference, and it seems clear that the idea is that if it's genetic and if gays and lesbians can't help it, then it must be okay. More on this in a moment, but there has long been suggested evidence of genetic factors contributing, since homosexuality tends to run in families, and studies of identical twins find that genetics accounts for 18% to 37% of similarities in sexual preference. Interestingly, it's not just a range. The percentage that is accounted for in genetics appears to be twice as much in men as in women. Coincidentally, men have one X chromosome to women's 2. So I'm half a woman. All of us guys are half a woman, just or a little bit of kind of a birth defect there. But it seems that many other factors are important as well, including even the prenatal environment. The day before yesterday, the largest and best study yet on this subject. Well, hello, Michael. Welcome back from Deutschland. Wie geht's? This is Mike Zapp, by the way. See how we are? We just come right up and sit in front. So this was published the day before yesterday in Science magazine. This is a study that looked at SNPs, what are called single nucleotide polymorphisms. These are variations in one base pair of the DNA across the whole genome, different, many of them, but they reflect overall genetic variation. And they did this study in almost 500,000 people in the USA and Britain. And what they found was 5 SNPs were identified, 2 in both men and women, 2 more in men, and 1 in women, that correlated with ever having same-sex activity. This compares to an average of 13.6 SNPs found in such studies of other traits, and as many as hundreds or even thousands of SNPs for some other traits that have been studied. None of the 5 SNPs were on the X chromosome, interestingly. They were all on the other chromosomes. And these SNPs were associated, many of them, with genes affecting sex hormone regulation, including male pattern baldness, and also with the sense of smell. The study authors also made an effort to drill down into the issue of same-sex preference by looking at such things as sexual identity, attraction, and fantasies. And they found that these things, as expected, were associated with same-sex sexual behaviors, although not perfectly. Interestingly, they also found that in the UK, subjects, same-sex sexual behavior increased with the subject's year of birth. That's that top graph. Why would that be? Any ideas? Is it a more accepting social attitude? Kind of interesting.
Tinder.
Huh?
Tinder.
Tinder, oh, okay. More opportunity to have same-sex relationships. Maybe meet people that were interested in
mother stress.
Or more stress? More overcrowding and stuff?
Yeah.
More dangerous world? I don't know.
It's just self-identification.
Anyway, it's something to think about. If it's completely genetic, maybe it would be a flat line, but I think you're right, maybe Tinder, maybe opportunity. So here's a couple of excerpts from the study report. Same-sex sexual behavior is influenced by not one or a few genes, but many. This is the study author's words. There's overlap with genetic influences on other traits. An analysis of different aspects of sexual preference underscores complexity and call into question the validity of bipolar continuum measures such as the Kinsey scale. So we've known for a long time, actually, things are much more complicated. I mean, we put people in prison and they'll tend to, with other people of the same sex, they tend to engage in same-sex behavior. And then when they get out of prison, they go back to opposite sex stuff. Well, and then this, overall, our findings suggest that the most popular measures of same-sex behavior are based on a misconception of the underlying structure of sexual orientation and may need to be rethought. But now consider this. Maybe some unreasonable superstitious zealots will have their beliefs undermined if it is shown that sexual preferences are genetic, such that homosexuals can't help it. But if it were mostly or even entirely a nurture rather than a nature effect, how would that change the unchosen character of it? Or might it be chosen in some sense if it's influenced by cultural social acceptance? I suspect most of us here don't feel that we have chosen not to want to eat insects, but if we've been raised in some part of the world where people commonly ate insects, we probably would. So we may very well ask, so what if it's not genetic? If people did just choose to engage in homosexual acts, would that make them more or less moral? I think as freethinkers, the answer is almost certainly no. Let people do what they want to do, as long as it's consensual sex. And maybe honest and with condom and all that sort of good stuff. Finally, while this research is interesting and important for understanding human sexual behavior, there are lots of other traits that we don't understand the genetics of either. Do you know that we don't understand the genetics of fingerprints? Why do you have the fingerprints you have? We don't understand the genetics of obesity, of most chronic medical problems, and even such an important trait as handedness. What makes you right-handed or left-handed? We don't know. Lots of studies, lots of things looking into that. And that's been a moment of science. Any comment about that? We'll move on to statistics. Lies and damn lies. So last time we considered science and whether it's enough, and for what, and for whom, and why, and in what way. Today we'll consider one of the most important and powerful tools of science, which is statistical analysis, or just statistics. The very term is daunting, even intimidating for many people, and I think there's good information in the bulletin there as well. At the very end, there's a couple of books that are recommended. But consider the role of science and with it the influence of statistics in the modern world. Just to cite a few areas of application, and I had to make the font small so it all fit on here. Environmental protection and safety. What are safe levels of arsenic in drinking water? How about lead, fluoride? Epidemiology, risk factors and disease clusters. You know, when a power line gets put in somewhere and two kids on the same block come down with leukemia, is that real? Did the power lines cause them to get leukemia? Medical treatments, the ones that work and the ones that don't. You know, a lot of published medical literature, which we'll talk more about in just a moment, but you know, that's how we know homeopathy is BS and some other things like that. Climate change, global warming. Of course, we know there's been controversy about that. Which year is the hottest on record, and people will cherry pick and say, well, look, during these years it hardly went up at all, because it's been sort of, you know, up and down. Management of livestock and wildlife, agriculture, making and enforcing international agreements and treaties, Business management and economic assessments. How often do we all hear about the unemployment rate, and then sometimes they'll even throw in seasonally adjusted. What does that mean? That means it's not really the rate or the measure they're talking about. They've adjusted it somehow. So we're constantly just getting an onslaught of all this statistical information. Measuring and testing, fault tolerance. How do they determine that these planes are still safe to fly after 30 years? Surveys. How about polls? We're starting to hear about that. Demographics, and of course the census coming up in 2020. Marketing, product quality control, assessment and performance. Trying to figure out whether a spacecraft is going to last as long as they plan. And then there's legal applications, what they call jury metrics. They study the likelihood that litigation is going to turn on one way or another. Machine learning, AI, all the algorithms that computers are taught and that they learn on their own. Signal processing, really all of the sciences from astronomy to molecular biology and thermodynamics to sociology. Remember, thermodynamics depends a lot on the concept of probability, which is a very strong thread of statistics. And notice that many of these things have to do with the activities of government. And that's actually where the term statistics comes from the word state. Statisches in German, meaning statecraft, or having to do with the government, reflecting the state's interest in keeping track of people and what they're doing. You may remember that the Bible has Mary and Joseph having to go to Bethlehem so the prophecy can be fulfilled, and how did they do that? The excuse was they had to go there for a Roman census. One of many absurdities in the Bible, because the Romans would never require everybody to go back to the city or location of their birth. Probably a lot of people had no idea where they were even born. The Romans were too good of administrators to have created and maintained their empire. They would never do such a stupid thing. But everybody always accepts it. I did as a kid, never even thought about it until I got older. Consider this too, it's known that Nazi Germany made use of statistics and also the early applications of computer science in carrying out its exterminations of Jews and other undesirables. How did they track these people down? Well, with computers and statistics. And that was way back in the 1930s and 1940s. Imagine what modern totalitarian states can do today with the amount of data that they can collect. We read about Chinese cameras being set up all over that are equipped with face recognition and related technologies. And of course, they have the ability with statistics to analyze it all. Of course, in the 21st century, a far greater number of people and groups are interested in, if not exactly statistics and its methods, the understanding that can be gotten from statistical methods of gathering, organizing, analyzing, and presenting vast, huge amounts of information. How many have gone on the internet and something you bought 6 months ago is following you around, they want you to buy it again? Businesses of all kinds, they depend on statistics these days to understand their customers, market conditions, and the economic outlook in their own and related industries more broadly. Public health organizations need to track illnesses and mortality rates by cause and other factors and recognize new threats that may arise. You heard about the death that happened recently from vaping. These are all things they're trying to track. National militaries and international monitoring and humanitarian groups want to be able to identify trends in social conditions and politics. And you may have heard of things like big data. That's that thing on the upper left screen. They talk about the 5 V's of big data. And among other things, they can tell all sorts of things about you, from your purchasing habits and many other tags that they attach to you. And how many have heard of the FBI's Project Carnivore? That was renamed as DSC 1000, which doesn't sound as intimidating, but now it's been replaced basically by commercial software. And this is software that mines electronic communications looking for the meat. That's why they call it Project Carnivore to begin with. So it's way, way more safe than to say, indeed, it's really glaringly obvious that there's no part of our lives today that is not affected by statistical methods, and often the effect is very significant. It promises, statistics that is, to become even more impactful on our lives. Yet, how much do most people know about it? And it's equally safe to say, I think, not much. Many times, little or nothing at all. How much do any of you know about statistics? How many of you took a statistics class or course? Yeah, okay, good. In high school? College? High school? Okay, high school's good. College, good too. How many have read statistics on their own? Well, that's a good thing too. Well, nobody should feel bad about not knowing much about statistics or any other important subject, and we all suffer from not knowing more about all sorts of things. I mean, that's why we strive to learn all we can, though it may never be enough. The fact is that even many scientists are not very familiar with statistical methods that they use in their work, and yet they're vital to what they do. The pressure in academia to publish or perish, you've all heard that phrase, it's very real. And there's a keen sense of competition in the sciences, and also to get funding. What if you get funding and you do research and there's nothing worth publishing, or actually whatever you do, even if it doesn't work out, should be published, but unless you come up with some breakthrough that makes the news, then the March of Dimes, whoever funded your work, doesn't get the publicity they're looking for. So all these things, especially the competition, is a good thing in many respects, but it encourages carelessness, if not recklessness, especially when combined with the also highly competitive and profitable scientific journal business. So now look at today's bulletin.
Jim, what's that top left, go backward? The index?
Oh, yes, the index of ignorance as to how ignorant people are around the world. And how do you think they measure this? By statistics. And who's number?
Who's on top? Italy?
Italy is number one. We're number two.
The Catholic Church?
The second most ignorant nation in the world. Yeah, well, that's right. The Catholic Church is right there in Italy again.
Yeah.
How about Germany? That's down the ways. Wait, it's the second from the bottom there on the top ones. And I thought this quote was interesting. Morris Klein, statistics, the mathematical theory of ignorance. Oh, and if you can't read that cartoon on the lower right there, the St. Peter say, oh, there must be some problem. I don't see your name here. And the person carrying the satchel says, can you please check under the publisher parish category? And then it shows the journals up at top, publisher parish. Garbage in, great books out.
So how did they, what statistics did they use for the index of ignorance?
Well, you have to look it all up.
Oh.
Yeah, the devil is in the details. This is what we're constantly faced with. Come across this, look, we're number two in ignorance, but how exactly did they measure it? Well, hopefully we'll get better at it. Here's the interesting thing, which we'll find out in a minute. Statistics is horribly flawed. Lots of ways it can go wrong. Lots of ways it can be misused, abused. But where would we be without it? We'd still be stumbling around in the dark like the ancient Greeks, thinking that cats can see in the dark because light comes out of their eyes. I mean, if you ever seen a cat, you see that kind of a shiny eye. They got their own light in their eyes. So how weird. Anyways, now we'll look at this month's bulletin. It draws attention to the association of statistics with lies and damned lies, which is really amazing considering that it's perhaps the most powerful tool of science for getting at the truth. Without it, we would doubtless still believe in all sorts of nonsense and ridiculousness. The bulletin suggests that a wider understanding of statistics is important and necessary, but people don't need to know the equations for calculating standard deviations and p-values any more than most people need to know just how their car's engine or motor, if you have an electric vehicle, it's a motor, not an engine. You don't need to know how that stuff works. What people need to know is how to drive safely and avoid accidents. How many of you have taken driver safety or defensive driving classes? Yeah. Oh, you got a ticket, huh? How much of that was about the timing belt and the car's electrical system? No, nothing. It's all about how when the railroad crossing things come down and you don't see the train, go driving through anyway. Good way to get killed. And for those of you who have also studied statistics, were the classes at all similar to that, the statistics classes? No. It was all about here's how you're going to solve Fisher's exact test and so on. They didn't dispense with that and focus on how and in what ways statistics can be done wrong, but that's the kind of education we need. So let's get to that. Statistics Done Wrong is a wonderful resource, less breezy and more detailed than its famous predecessor, the best-selling 1954 How to Lie with Statistics. Those two books on the left are the main ones that I've perused. I didn't get a chance to look at the one on the right, Damn Lies and Statistics. The middle one was written by a statistician. The one on the left, that was a 1954 best-selling book, actually, at the time that it came out. That was written by a journalist. And of course, journalists see all kinds of statistical figures nowadays, and I wonder how many of them even bother to question it. That third book, I've not had a chance to look at it. Its author is a professor of sociology and criminal justice at the University of Delaware, so I suspect it's good. That particular book is available online at the URL shown. kind of small there, but if you just search on it, search on the name of the book, Analyzing Statistics, and then PDF, it's available online. The whole thing is a PDF. And if you forget that, you can always email me. The email is in the bulletin, and I'll send you the link. So, statistics begins with measuring and gathering information. Very often, everything of interest cannot be measured, or so samples must be taken, and this always introduces the potential for error. It is inescapable. So for example, if you want to know how much of some substance is in a body of water, you couldn't test the whole entire body of water, you would just take a sample. But you can only justifiably do this if you took enough of it and in the right way such that it was truly representative of the entire body of water. Maybe you want to take multiple samples and combine them or do them separately. And the same goes for anything. This time next year, the news is going to be flooded with what? Polling data, of course. Polls are notoriously subject to sampling error. How do they find the people that they're asking who they're going to vote for? The people who happen to answer the phone and are willing to respond to questions more or less likely to vote a certain way? Did you respond to a poll? Or you're busy, you're out in the world, I mean, are random people in public places really representative of the larger population? What about the people who are shopping on Amazon? And regardless of who responds to a poll, is it a fair sample of those who will actually vote? So, and these two slides just talk about sampling error. And that lower right thing shows, look at the sampling error that happens if you just generate 1,000 random numbers. And that shows the numbers between different intervals, how they vary. You don't get an equal number of numbers between equal ranges, even when they're just random numbers. Sample size matters a lot. So suppose you want to determine something so simple as to whether a coin is a fair coin. You want to flip it to see if it's coming up heads or tails more often than it should. How many times would you have to flip it? Well, if you could depend on how right or wrong you want it to be, it would depend on how right or wrong you want to be. These curves here are called power curves. They show the likelihood of being able to tell whether a coin is fair or not, depending on how fair it may or may not be for the top one, the top two, top left 10 tosses, then on the right 100 tosses, and on the bottom 1,000 tosses. You see how that curve narrows. And if you can read the numbers from there, you'll see that if you're looking for a coin that flips heads 80% of the time, that's 0.8. You can see that you're going to miss that about 25% of the time if you only do 10 tosses. And if that unfair coin is rigged to flip heads 60% of the time, you'll miss that 80% of the time. And let's face it, if you're going to make an unfair coin, you're not going to make it too obvious. You maybe only make it come up the way you want 52% of the time. I mean, the casinos can do very well on a roulette wheel. It only has two little spaces for the ball to go that are green, which is the house's take, and all the rest are red and black, which the players can win. And so this is how it works with everything else too. That is, if the effect you're looking for is uncommon or rare, you need a much larger sample size. If you do it with less, they say your study is underpowered. What is being measured and how it is measured also matters a lot. In the case of polls and public opinion surveys, for example, are the questions loaded? Are the questions vague or open to interpretation? What does it matter if a certain percent of the sample population says something and that something could mean very different things to different people? Like we were talking about earlier, are you religious? What does spiritual mean? Or if the question is embarrassing or the answer may be felt to reflect on one's character. There's some very interesting things that have been done with this. In this last example, it's been found that when church attendance is measured not by asking people, but by counting the people in church, or just counting the cars in the parking lot, you get much lower numbers versus when you ask people who regularly attend church. Isn't that interesting? I wonder why that is. One of the most common problems, and perhaps the most serious, is P hacking. P is a measure of how statistically unlikely a set of measurements are, sort of a surprise factor. Think of the power curves that you saw earlier where the likelihood of finding a real effect is greater with more coin tosses. The usual standard for statistical significance is called a P less than 0.05, meaning the result is only expected to happen by chance with a likelihood of less than 5% or 1 in 20. So this is a cartoon where the guy on the left, you can read read that from there, I think. He says, bingo, he's obviously been poring over the data. People who didn't have a stroke were more likely to drink soy latte on Tuesday than green tea daily or the occasional espresso. Everyone should drink lots of soy lattes. And the person on the left is saying, "Arg, help me, Bonferroni." This is not an Italian or French cartoon with Bonferroni meaning God. Bonferroni is a statistician who came up with a way to correct for doing multiple measurements. So what would happen if you measured 20 different things? You wouldn't get always one that was significant, but that's the idea. The more different analyses you do, the more likely you're just to happen on one just by chance. If you measured 100 different things, you're probably going to find a few where p is less than 0.05. And that's the point of this. I know it's very small, but you got a couple of people there. One is saying to the other, top or left, jelly beans cause acne. Scientists investigate, and they're saying, "Oh, but we're playing Minecraft." So they study it anyway, and they come back and say, "No, not caused by jelly beans." So then they go, "Well, I think it has to do with the color of the jelly beans." So then you see they go on and on. Tested red jelly beans, no effect, no effect, blue, purple, blah, blah, blah. And finally, that upper, second one over from the top left, where there's a whoa coming from the scientists saying, "Well, we did find an effect from green jelly beans. Green jelly beans do cause acne." So the next thing you know, the newspaper's got a story, green jelly beans linked to acne. Does that sound familiar? Like, oh, here's a drug that causes birth defects. They might have looked at lots and lots of different things. Now you have to get an independent sample, and for them to report that, it's terribly irresponsible. To some degree, it's probably irresponsible for the reading public not to, say that's a bunch of baloney, I want the facts, and demand more of our news reporters, right? This sort of cheating is making the company that sells this product a lot of money. This is a nutritional supplement that's supposed to improve memory. Initial studies showed the stuff did nothing. But after additional torturing of the data, the company came up with a p less than 0.05 in like a small group, small numbers. And of course, remember, if you do small numbers, you're more likely to have fluctuations and something's going to show up. In this case, it's actually being litigated now, and the initial judge threw it out saying, well, the company's got proof. Fortunately, it was reversed on appeal. Now it's been reinstated because that judge or panel of judges understood, no, you can find things by chance that are not proof. But when you see the ads for Prevagen, they're disgusting. Also, I think it's interesting, look at that graph on the right, where they've shown, I don't know, see if you can read that, somebody's blowing up my phone here. Look at the improved memory after 8 days, after 30 days, and after 90 days. Well, the fact of the matter is that p-values wander around. They don't tell you the p-value for each one of those things. It's probably just on the overall, because that p-value happened to cross the significance line at the point where they stopped the study. And it's funny that they don't show, let's say, 10 days, 30 days, or 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. If those were better bar charts, I think the company would have shown those, wouldn't they? So here's some other ways of getting that magical p less than 0.05. And like I said, you just stop at different points in the analysis. Some scientific studies are actually stopped partway through to check and see if p is less than 0.05. It can be justified to save money, but you only have to use extreme caution, and you have to use additional statistical methods to see how likely it is that stopping it prematurely just happened to give you by chance that falsely significant result. And of course, you guessed it, there are statistical tools like the Bonferroni correction to deal with these problems. So, just as there's a saying, if you search the internet, you'll find the trope, torture the data until it confesses. Okay, here's a case where, again, it's a presentation of information, kind of like the Prevagen thing. This is an example from the UK, where Colgate advertised that more than 80% of dentists recommend Colgate. The problem was, and the company was taken to task for it, had to pull these ads because what they did is they asked dentists what brands of toothpaste, plural, they recommended. If the response included Colgate, they counted it as recommending, even though the same dentist recommended additional other brands. It might even be that more dentists included another brand as those that included Colgate. But of course, when you read a billboard like this, you get the idea that 80% of dentists are recommending Colgate above and beyond or better than any other brand. But Colgate's not gonna tell the public the details of how they get this information, so-called information, which, you know, it's lies by omission, right? Here's another example from that 1954 book by Darrell Huff, How to Lie with Statistics. These are both the same graph. Government payroll's up on the left, and government payroll's stable. Well, you see what they've done is, look at the covariate on the left. On the left-hand one, they've got 20,000 and 19.5 widely separated. On the right, they've got 10, 20, and 30, so they've compressed all of that. And what looks like a steep upward curve at the end of the one on the left is just a little bit up on the right. So it's information tortured until it confesses and sell the point of view that you want to sell. By the way, you know, damned lies, that clearly shows this subject is religious, right? So, damned religious. So when I came across this, I just had to put it up, had to find a way to work it in, especially since it includes the sins, the 9 circles of scientific hell. That's religious, right? Sins of data manipulation and suppression. I just couldn't resist working it in. Well, there's some very important general considerations about statistics, and there's many more than this. It's similar to the subject of logical fallacies that John Gautier has taught us about. Gaming the system has been going on probably forever, and it's important to realize this and to keep up with all the ways that the ignorant and incompetent, and yes, the cheaters and criminals too, are benefiting themselves to the cost of the rest of us. As we discussed a couple of services ago, almost everyone, but certainly the media and its paymasters, the advertisers, are trying to sell you their stuff, getting you to believe what serves their interests, and enlisting your support, or at the very least, keep you from objecting to or opposing their agendas, getting you to talk about it with your friends, and as I said, at least not getting in their way. At least in science, there have been some improvements. For example, there's a research project registry where the protocols for a study can be entered beforehand, and there are some journals that will not print your study unless it's been registered ahead of time. They want to know that you measured what you set out to measure, and not that you did this p-hacking stuff. So that obviously is something that makes it harder for researchers to do that. Context matters as well, more often than is realized. Perhaps the most common instance of this, especially in medical science, is when the effect of some treatment is statistically significant, but not clinically significant. For example, there's a medication billed as the female Viagra. How many have heard of that? The brand name is Adye. Okay, so when this came out, because they came to my office and wanted me to prescribe it for all my patients who need to have more sex drive, right? Over $400 a month this costs to take daily, and you're supposed to abstain from alcohol all the while you're taking it too. But on average, how many additional, in the studies they did, how many additional satisfying sexual experiences, that's what they call the SSEs, satisfying sexual experiences, how much additional per month did the study show was the result? Statistically significant, of course. Any guesses? 1. For $400 a month, taking a pill every single day and having to abstain from alcohol. Maybe people would find other ways to enjoy themselves, or maybe just make a date and do it, because usually afterwards they did enjoy themselves. So the most effective way to resist all of this is, besides becoming more knowledgeable about the pitfalls of statistics, having more skepticism, even about things that we're inclined to think, oh, gee, we can trust this, it's statistics. Try not to believe things. As the saying goes, believe nothing that you hear or read and only half of what you see. And it is better to believe nothing than to believe what's wrong. With some things this may seem rather extreme, but what harm is there in, say, even reading a nonfiction book by a reliable and respected writer, recognized historian or whatever, but holding it in your mind is, this is what this person says, this is what the scholars have settled on currently, rather than just believing in it with no qualification or doubts. Doubt should never be very far from our minds. That is the real counterbalance to faith. Not no faith, but doubt.
I really like that. It's got lie. I never
Oh, you noticed that?
Never knew that. It's got lie in the middle of.
So doubt should never be very far from our minds. Although in most of our everyday experiences is not something we're continually preoccupied with, but that's right, you know, there's a lie in belief. Remember too that scientists, just like the rest of us, are only human. I mean, what else would they be? Even the smartest of them. One of the smartest, James D. Watson, the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, what they call the Watson-Crick base pairing, said this: "One could not be a successful scientist without realizing that, in contrast to the popular conception supported by newspapers and mothers of scientists, a goodly number of scientists are not only narrow-minded and dull, but also just stupid." I took a postgraduate course from this guy when I was in college. He came up to Cold Spring Harbor a couple times a week to give this class. And I definitely remember one class where he's going through this guy's work. Pretty much the whole lecture was about this work being done in this particular lab. Then he got to the end of that part, nearly the end of the lecture, and he said, "But I'm not going to ask you to remember all this stuff because I think you need to know about it, but I'm not going to ask you to remember it because it's a bunch, I forget the exact words he used, but basically saying, this is a bunch of crap. I've been to the guy's lab, he's sloppy, he's stupid." You can hear all these pages being torn out of the notebooks. People were not going to study it. So, what does that bring us to? It's been our hour. How quickly it went by. Comments, questions, answers? Yes?
Well, you know, something I constantly hear that people try to use as an argument, and it's kind of along with statistics, and this has to do with,
Can somebody pass her this?
oh, you
That's
can't
what
hear me?
We want to hear you close.
All right.
What you say is important too.
Oh, well, is this working?
Yes.
Okay. I hear this discussion kind of given out all the time, that why are we so concerned about doing away with guns when cars kill more people than guns? You know, now this is apples and oranges, but this is used. Let's also talk about sin. Obviously, the left coast and the right coast are more sinful because they have more earthquakes than the people in the middle. I mean, these are kind of things you'll hear.
It is interesting. In fact, I didn't mention that, but even we, you know, lay people, non-scientists who don't work with statistics every day, we still argue with statistics. Well, what about this? You know, this is a hazard. Yeah, but falling television sets kill more people than drowning in a bathtub or, you know, any number of things. There's some very interesting examples of this is pointed out as statistics done wrong. During the 1970s with the oil crisis and the cost of gas going up so high, that's when they started, when they instituted this laws that allow you to turn right on a red light. There was concern at the time that maybe it was unsafe, maybe it would cause more accidents, but there were some studies done that showed that it didn't seem to increase accidents, and so these kind of became common. Obviously, we have that in Texas. Well, it turned out that these studies that they did that didn't show an effect were small studies. And remember, if there's a small effect, a small study may not show it. When you combine these and you do larger studies, it turns out there are more accidents if you allow right turns on red lights.
And the guns and cars example that she gave was an example of a false dichotomy.
Well, that's the thing, see, you can argue back and forth with that. I mean, I don't misspell, you know, I don't misspell words, my keyboard misspells words.
Not your fault.
It's not mine, yeah, I have nothing to do with it.
Could you,
One day we're gonna have
Elaborate.
driverless cars and people will look back and say, how in the world did we ever live in a world where everybody drove their own car? I mean, all the car accidents and big carnage on the roads and so forth. So,
could you explain that a bit?
That's-
What do you mean by false dichotomy?
That ties into the fallacies. Is a false dichotomy is a logical fallacy. When someone presenting two options presents them as if they are mutually exclusive, and that suggesting, that, in other words, missing the point that you can't do something about both cars and guns.
yeah.
So it's like the recommended toothpaste. If you allow doctors to choose multiple toothpastes to recommend, then it's not an either or proposition. Yes, they recommend Crest, but they recommend a Colgate, but they also recommend Crest.
Now, I think that comes under a different category, but it's
Yeah.
similar, yeah.
There's also something called the base rate fallacy, which we talked about briefly before the service. And this is a statistical problem also. So people come out and say, well, mammograms detect some cancers, yes, but gosh, look at all the false positives and biopsies that are done in people that are perfectly normal and so on and so forth. And again, these arguments are statistical, but it depends on the population you're studying. So if you went and did a mass screening and tested everybody in the whole country for HIV, you're going to get an awful lot of false positives. just because the incidence, the prevalence of HIV positive is low. But if you go into a high-risk population, then more of the tests that show up positive are going to be true positives, and fewer will be false positives. How many know if you get a mammogram, as a woman, you get a mammogram in the recommended age range, what is the likelihood that positive means you get breast cancer? It's only 9% if you do the math. It probably varies a bit because a 40-year-old has less chance of getting breast cancer than, say, a 60-year-old because breast cancer peaks out at about 60 years of age. So then you're down to, well, would you like to have a mammogram knowing that if it's positive, 9 times out of 10, you don't have cancer and you may get a biopsy for no reason? Because if you have cancer, that's something you don't want to miss. That'll kill you. So, and this is one of the problems too, I think, with the U.S. Public Health Service when they make recommendations, sometimes they're motivated by money more than by what maybe the average person would say. I don't think they're doing polling to see, well, how many biopsies would you endure in order not to miss a case of cancer. I will tell you this, if I have a pregnant patient, if I line up a bunch of full-term pregnant people and I tell them, you all need to have a cesarean if you want to avoid one of you having a stillborn, they would all be first, right? Because you don't want to go all the way through the pregnancy and give birth to a dead baby. So that's something to think about when you hear these news stories about unnecessary cesareans. There are a couple, now things do change over time and they get better. How many have heard of thalidomide? Okay. So thalidomide was a drug that actually came out in Germany to begin with. It was marketed all over Europe as a sedative, hypnotic, and also it turned out would help morning sickness. So they were given it to pregnant women. And it didn't take long before the little babies are being born with no arms, or little flippers, or their hands are just like coming out of their shoulders. Thalidomide was never approved in the United States because one person at the FDA, a lady named Frances Oldham Kelsey, wouldn't approve it, got it its way. And she ultimately got a Presidential Medal of Freedom by JFK in 1962 because it was used to some degree in the United States as investigational, but in those days they didn't have like research studies, double-blind, etc. They would just like hand out the pills to doctors and say, try it on your patients, and then we'll see if they have a problem or not. So it did affect some people in the United States, but not the millions of women that were exposed, pregnant women exposed in Europe. There's another drug called DES, which is a synthetic estrogen, just an estrogen to be used to treat menopausal symptoms and so forth. But during the 1940s, it was thought to prevent miscarriage. And there were some studies done, small studies, that showed that it prevents miscarriage. Well, if you're a woman and you're pregnant, maybe you've never even had a miscarriage and don't like born children, and you start having some bleeding in early pregnancy, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to ask your doctor, can I take that? I don't want to miscarry just one too. So it was used all over the place, DES, diethylstilbestrol. In 1954, they came out with a study saying it probably does not prevent miscarriage after all. But it kept being used because, heck, maybe, right? And then by the early 1970s, and it was approved by the FDA for use in pregnant women. And then by the early 1970s, 1971 in fact, studies came out showing that people that have been exposed to this as embryos, fetuses in their mother's womb, the women, were getting these rare vaginal cancers called clear cell carcinoma. So the FDA immediately took it off the market. But there are still people today who are affected by this. And these kinds of debacles did result in changes. Now the FDA has pregnancy categories, A, B, C, D, and X. So we know, for example, not to use this acne drug, I forget the name of it, people who are pregnant, because it definitely,
Accutane.
Accutane, yes, that's exactly it. So things have gotten better, and like I said, even in science, things are getting better. I actually got some additional papers here. There was well, first of all, here's something that's mentioned by the Statistics Done Wrong book. They talk about the fact that when they do these functional MRIs, that they look at voxels, which are basically three-dimensional pixels in the brain, and they compare statistics. They divide the brain up into many, many, many voxels, which are like pixels on two-dimensional surface, and they look for whether or not before and after the intervention there's a change. Statistics is all about looking at change and looking at comparisons. And then, of course, all kinds of things are reported. Oh, we found the functional magnetic resonance imaging, this, that, and the other thing. Well, in this one, they took the study subjects and showed them pictures of people and recorded the changes that happened in their brains. Except the subjects were not people. They weren't even alive. They were dead salmon. I got several of these if you want to pass them on, or whatever they disappear to. If you email me, I'll send you the link to go find it.
You got a red herring in
Dead
there somewhere?
salmon. There's a red herring. Yeah. A red fish, a salmon. Another thing, this is probably one of the most cited papers in the world now by a guy named John Unitas. It's a Greek name. You know how Greeks always spell things? No, Unitas. But it's spelled I-O-A-N-N-I-D-I. It's like Socrates, you know, who knew that that's pronounced Socrates. But at any rate, the title of this thing is Why Most Published Research Findings Are False. Intrigued? Yeah, you might want to take a look at this. Several pages, he explains a lot of this things we're talking about. So,
There's also a problem in the general population with ignorance of statistics, which of course makes people vulnerable to bad statistics. And I don't know, you probably have, I've seen this many times, where if you quote a statistic,
he's saying some good stuff there.
I've seen this many times with people where if you quote a statistic, then you tell them, well, they did a study of 3,000 people in the population of the United States and found only and they found some result. And I'll say, well, but you didn't test everybody in the United States. In other words, they implicitly distrust statistics if you don't test the entire population, and they don't understand the concept is it doesn't matter how big the population is, it only matters how big the sample size is. That's why you always see these political...
And how you select the sample.
Right, you always, and how you select it. And so...
And even in cases where there have been published research studies where they even just had random assignment of patients to sample to different groups, arms of the study, where when they unblinded the study at the end and looked at it, there were differences between the randomly selected groups.
There's a reason that you always see plus or minus 3% in surveys. Is because they all pick a convenient sample size of 1,000.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what the size of the population, as long as you pick 1,000, then mathematically your error rate, assuming that you've got perfect sampling, is plus or minus 3%.
There's a movement to substitute what they call confidence intervals for p-values. In other words, instead of looking for this p, because that makes it a little bit harder to hack the numbers. You have a confidence value, and if it crosses 1, that means it's as likely as not. So that would be one change. That would be helpful. But Dr. Unitas, he's a medical doctor. I've got this already. He's done a great job. His work is cited. There's a lot of interest in this, what is now being called meta-science, a step beyond just plain old science. And so we can look for improvement. Isn't that nice to know that things are going to get better? But they don't get better quickly enough, do they? Any other comments?
Now, speaking of the medical, one of the things they used to push birth control pills, even if you weren't active sexually, let's say, or whatever, is that it would prevent you from having a heart attack. And that was a good thing. However, of course, as time went on, they found out if you're on them for a longer period of time, it could actually create breast cancer.
If you're, well, actually that's not been a strong linkage, but if you're over the age of 35 and you smoke, they do increase the risk of heart attack.
It may be, but I'm saying it was like not as far as the birth, what they were doing it for originally was for birth control. But they were giving these estrogen hormones, of course, it caused breast cancers to become worse within the sample people that they were using it. So the doctor stopped saying that it was a good preventing heart attacks.
Well,
Every doctor I've
I know
gone
quite
to
a lot
mentioned-
about. I know quite a lot about that just because of my profession and having studied it pretty deeply. But
So
That's
do you-
subject
so
to a
do you-
whole other church service.
So do you recommend that women take that for a prevent a heart attack?
It turns out that women who are on an estrogen product at the time they're diagnosed with breast cancer actually have better survival. Now, whether that's because they're being monitored more closely, or current theory is, and they're still investigating this, so it's better if you're not menopausal now because we'll know more in another 10 years. But it's thought that estrogens don't cause breast cancer, but they accelerate. They'll take a breast cancer that's already there and make it grow more. But that can be a good thing if it makes the breast cancer show up quicker before the cancer cells. The worst thing about cancer is not that they grow uncontrollably and so forth, it's that they don't hang on to their neighbors. They break off and go to the lymph nodes and other parts of the body that metastasize. If they could find a drug that would stop the cancer cells from doing that, it wouldn't matter. The cancer would be a chronic disease. And that's kind of where maybe we're headed. Because if cancer only recurs locally, you just go ahead and cut it out again. It's not spreading to your brain and your lungs and doing you in. So that's currently the thinking as to why maybe being on estrogen is not such a bad thing if you do get breast cancer, that the estrogen doesn't actually cause it. But certainly if you're a smoker over the age of 35, you're on birth control pills, you have an increased risk of getting a heart attack. Lots of weird stuff. I mean, there's been other innovations in medicine. I mean, think about ulcers. How many people have had relatives with ulcers, stomach ulcers? They had surgery to operate to remove these stomach ulcers. Well, it was figured out in the last couple of decades that stomach ulcers are caused by a bacterium. Helicobacter pylori it's called. Who knew? And this was kind of a hard sell at first because it just seemed so strange. But it's accepted now because when the evidence was good and people were convinced, then we're not going to operate on your stomach ulcer. We're going to treat you with an antibiotic.
Yeah, the conventional wisdom was that stress causes
Yes,
ulcers.
stress and spicy food, yes, that causes ulcers. Right.
I remember that.
At one time, there was a disease in pregnancy where you get high blood pressure and other problems called preeclampsia. There was a report back when I was in training in the 1980s saying that somebody had found like parasites in placentas of women with preeclampsia. So everybody was all agog. Oh my gosh, parasites cause preeclampsia. Didn't pan out. Couldn't be replicated. And that's another thing that is important in this meta-science stuff. We always hear about science as objective finds that can be replicated. How many scientific studies are actually replicated though? Even the most cited studies, how many people actually go to the trouble of replicating? Not many. There's actually something called replicability or something like that project where they took like the 100 most famous influential papers in psychology. It was on social sciences, more squishy than physics, obviously. And they went back and they found that they can only replicate maybe 30% of them. The 2/3 they couldn't even replicate. These important findings that everybody took to heart and was basing their beliefs and practice on. That's kind of scary, isn't it? So, this quote from Richard Feynman in the bulletin today about how science came along and found ways to separate the nonsense from the useful information. What he called what was profitable from what was not. We're still not there yet.
That's a problem when you have an agenda to look for a statistic to fit your
Correct.
goal.
Like we were saying, the p-hacking and all these kinds of things. So know about these things. Remember, there's a lie in every belief. Be skeptical. You don't have to believe that much. Believe what that you were here today and that what I said. You don't have to believe everything I said. Don't do that.
But belief and faith are very similar.
Right.
I want to go back to what you talked about first as far as religion and versus spirituality.
Yeah. What's spirituality? Does that mean woo-woo or no?
Yeah,
If it doesn't mean woo-woo, I'm okay with it.
Had a lengthy discussion about this, and because one of the ladies, matter of fact, I was going to Unitarian.
Put the mic up close to your mouth.
I was going to Unitarian Church at the time, and she'd been going there for about 3 years. And she said, I like the people here and all, but it's just not spiritual enough for me. And so then the discussion is, okay, so how do we define spiritual? That's a hard thing. As a matter of fact, I think that we finally had to say that your spirituality, however you are going to define it, is actually something that's within you. It's not going to be the elder or someone else isn't going to be able to give it to you. But I realize that there are those that feel like there's something that's within you that gives you an emotion of awe or whatever. Seems to be furthered by music, by the surroundings of a grand church. I mean, look at us here, we're in black. I don't know, of course, if this is very, leads us more to feeling in awe or spiritual. It has to be something else.
Well, doesn't my dressing up every time make you feel more
No,
spiritual?
I
Should I get a big hat?
I don't
the
like
tie.
that tie.
I can order a bishop's robes. I actually have a collar too, I could wear that.
But you know, it's so funny because, you know, if you don't want to say you're a Christian, it's always a good cop-out to say, but I'm spiritual. And so if someone were to say, well, now, what do you mean about that? I find that that gets to be a very difficult thing to describe.
And actually, at one of our past talks given by one of our mental health professionals who doesn't usually come, but we should get her to come again. She had said and presented statistics that show in areas with great natural beauty, church attendance is lower. You know, if you live in the plains of Kansas or something, church attendance is whatever it is. But if you live in Oregon, where you can just drive out to Crater Lake on the weekend, church attendance is less. And of course, the Greeks, you know, they're oracles and they're great places where the gods would be. They weren't in a parking lot or, you know, if they had parking lots back then, it wasn't any boring place. It was up in the mountains. In fact, I believe one of the oracles was the place where volcanic gases were coming out, you know, so people would go and get kind of, you know, high off of that. Hear the gods telling them stuff. So yeah, there's definitely an element of that. With regard to, this is the other thing I find often when I get into discussions with people. People want to talk about something and they say, well, here's a dictionary, it defines something as this and that. You have to stick to that definition. I'm not going to let you stray from the definition. Well, first of all, the dictionary definitions are kind of squishy. Second of all, what does it matter? What really matters is what do you mean? When you say it's not spiritual enough, what do you mean by saying that? It can mean different things to different people. If it means something to you, we call that spirituality 1. If it means something different to you, spirituality 2. This is spirituality 3, you know, prime, double prime, like in mathematics, you know, if you have a different number, don't just call it all by the same symbol. Distinguish, make distinctions. That's how we learn.
But
In
if
fact, you know,
everybody
there's an
has a
ancient
different-
Chinese saying, you know, calling things by their right names. So if it's not the same thing, don't call it by the same name. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
But if everyone has a different meaning for the same word, how do we communicate? We can't like ask continually every moment of our lives, okay, well, what did you mean by that? We have to have shared meaning.
Well, you have to realize when something gets really subjective, which is what we always talk about religion is. The taste of Atlantic salmon. I might describe it one way, you might describe it another. I like it. Kit doesn't like it. She doesn't like seafood. Was I supposed to spill the beans on that? Was that bad? At any rate, we have to realize that we all have different perspectives, and sometimes that does alter what we, how we look at things. In fact, I'm trying to think of a saying. It's right. I'm just having some pressed view right now. I'm right on the verge of remembering what it is. It's something like people don't have so much different opinions as different perspectives, different ways of looking at the same thing. Now in science, you don't have that. You can't have that, but that's good. Because when the photographs of Pluto come back, we're both looking at the same thing.
Well, you know, with marijuana or with LSD or some of these things, you know, the big selling factor would be that you're having an altered mind, a spiritual experience. And so many people, you know, that have enjoyed their drugs of this nature that has hallucinations or makes you become more one with the universe, they do it on a drug high.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, if you go reading up on these things, you know, like ayahuasca from South America and things like that, they'll call them entheogens, things that will put God in you. Obviously not some supernatural God, they just create this kind of ethereal, weird stuff.
A well-known psychologist said spirituality involves subtle and complex interactions between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system.
Yeah, there's something going on in the brain, that's for sure.
Damage any part of it,
Yeah, of course, there's speculation that, Paul had a seizure disorder and he would get auras. I think with St. Bernadette, we've got migraine headaches, and migraine headaches often come with auras, something premonitory. And she interpreted those as visions of heaven, you get a glimpse into heaven. That's really what we need, the one thing that'd be better than statistics would be revelation, reliable revelation from a greater being who just come and tell us stuff. It's just too bad the Bible doesn't have anything like that. Well, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. And we'll go to Jason's next and talk about it there.